A photograph sat in a shoebox for 100 years. No one opened it. No one asked why. Then, in 2023, a historian scanned it for an archive. She zoomed in on one soldier's face. She stopped. She called a colleague. He looked too. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. What they saw did not match anything in the historical record. This is the story of that photograph. The photo came from an estate sale in rural Pennsylvania. A family was clearing out a relative's attic. Inside an old cedar chest, they found dozens of tintype photographs. Most were unremarkable. Soldiers standing stiff. Families posed in front of farmhouses. This was normal for the 1860s. Cameras were new. People took few photos, and they took them seriously. One image stood out only because of its condition. It was cracked at the edges. The surface had a strange sheen, like oil on water. The family did not think much of it. They boxed it with the rest and sold the lot to a local collector. The collector was a quiet man named Walter Grumman. He had spent 30 years gathering Civil War artifacts. Buttons, belt buckles, letters home. Most of it sat in storage, waiting for someone to care. He did not expect this photo to be different. He almost did not scan it at all. But a local historical society was building a digital archive. They wanted every tintype photographed at high resolution, so historians could study uniform details and unit insignia. Grumman brought in his collection, image by image. A technician named Diane Voss ran each photo through a flatbed scanner built for fragile materials. When she reached the cracked photograph, the scan took longer than usual. She thought the machine was malfunctioning. It was not. The photo had unusual density in one corner, as if something had been layered underneath the original image. She zoomed in on her monitor, just to check the focus. That is when she saw the face. It belonged to a man standing at the back row, half in shadow. His uniform matched the others. His stance did not. He was looking directly at the camera, at an angle where no other soldier looked. His eyes seemed to track something the camera itself could not have shown him. Diane assumed it was a trick of old film chemistry. Tintypes often warped with age. Faces blurred. Details vanished. But this face had not blurred. It had sharpened, as though someone, or something, had reached forward through a century of silence to be seen. She sent the file to her supervisor. He would not respond to her for 2 full days. Diane Voss waited 2 days for a reply. When her supervisor, Historical Society Director Marcus Alden, finally wrote back, his message was short. He asked her to bring the original photo to his office, and not to discuss it with anyone else yet. She thought this was strange. Alden was not a man who acted with urgency. He had spent his career cataloging old letters and rusted bayonets. He rarely raised his voice, let alone paused a project for 2 days. When she arrived, he had the photo already pinned under a magnifying lamp. He did not look up right away. "Tell me what you see," he said. She described the same thing she had described in her email. A soldier in the back row. Sharp focus. Eyes turned toward the camera at an angle that made no sense for the period. Tintype cameras needed long exposure times. Subjects had to stay still, often for several seconds. Any small movement blurred the image. This man had not blurred. He looked almost stitched into the photograph, more real than the men around him. Alden turned the magnifying lamp toward her. "Now look at his collar," he said. She leaned in. The uniform buttons matched Union Army standard issue for the year the photo was dated. But the collar insignia did not match any regiment on record for that county. Alden had spent 3 decades studying local units. He knew every symbol, every variation, every clerical error made by tired quartermasters in 1863. This symbol was not one of them. It was close enough to pass a casual glance, but subtly wrong, like a copy made by someone who had seen the real thing only once. Diane asked if it could be a mistake. Soldiers sometimes wore mismatched gear. Uniforms were scarce. Alden did not answer directly. Instead, he asked her a question that stayed with her for weeks afterward. Why does he look like he's been added? He did not mean it as metaphor. He meant it literally. The lighting on the man's face did not match the lighting on the rest of the group. Shadows fell in one direction across the other soldiers. On this man, they fell in another. It was a small detail, the kind most people would never notice. But once seen, it could not be unseen. Alden asked Diane to lock the file and say nothing to the press. He wanted an imaging expert to look at it first, someone outside their small archive team. He said if he was wrong, it would cost them nothing. If he was right, he did not know what it would cost them. If you value deep investigations like this, consider subscribing. 3. The expert who went silent, Marcus Alden, reached out to a forensic image analyst named Dr. Priya Nathan. She worked mostly with law enforcement, examining digital evidence for signs of tampering. Old tintypes were outside her usual work, but the physics of light and shadow do not change with the camera. She agreed to take a look. She received the high-resolution scan on a Tuesday afternoon. By Thursday, she had not sent a report. This was unusual for her. She was known for fast turnarounds, often finishing analysis within a day. Alden assumed she was busy with other cases. When she finally called, her voice sounded different, careful, measured, in a way that suggested she had rehearsed what to say. She confirmed what Alden already suspected. The lighting on the soldier's face followed a different light source than the rest of the group. In a normal photograph, every subject shares the same sun, the same shadows, the same directional glow. This man did not. His face was lit from a source roughly 40 degrees off from where the sun would have been that day, based on shadow angles from the surrounding trees. This kind of inconsistency usually points to one thing: manipulation, a composite image, someone adding a face after the fact. But there was a problem. The photograph was a tintype, made using a wet plate process from the 1860s. This method used a single sheet of chemically treated metal. Exposed once, developed once, there was no way, with the technology of that era, to layer one image onto another. Composite photography existed at the time, but it required multiple exposures, careful darkroom work, and specialized skill. It left visible seams under magnification. This photo had none. Dr. Nathan told Alden she had run the image through 3 separate forensic tools used for detecting digital splicing. All 3 flagged the same region around the soldier's face, yet none of them could explain how, or when, that alteration might have happened using period-accurate materials. She told him plainly, the manipulation looked real, and it looked impossible. Alden asked if the photo could be a modern fake, something built recently using an old-style camera process. Dr. Nathan said this was possible, and worth investigating. But the metal plate itself had been tested separately by the Historical Society's materials lab. The tin, the chemical residue, the oxidation pattern, all of it matched the 1860s. Something did not add up. A face added with tools that should not have existed, onto a plate confirmed to be genuine. Dr. Nathan asked Alden one final question before ending the call. She wanted to know if anyone else in the photograph had been identified. He told her no. Not yet. She told him to start there. Alden decided to treat the photo like a piece of evidence rather than an artifact. He asked Diane Voss to document everything about the physical object itself, separate from the image content, where it had been stored, what condition it was in, any markings on the back of the plate. The back of the tintype had faint pencil writing, nearly worn away. Diane used raking light, a technique where light is angled sharply across a surface to reveal indentations invisible under normal lighting. Slowly, letters emerged. A date, a location, Antietam, Maryland, September 1862. This was significant. Antietam was one of the bloodiest single days in American history. Thousands of soldiers died in a matter of hours. Photographers were present, though cameras of that era could not capture motion, only stillness before or after combat. Photos from Antietam exist in real archives today, and historians have studied them for over a century. Diane Cross referenced the location and date with known photographic collections from that battle. She found something troubling: several photos from Antietam, held in a separate national archive, showed the same regiment, the same tree line, the same formation of soldiers standing for a group portrait. The other soldiers matched. Same faces, same positions, same uniforms. The extra man did not appear in any of them. This meant one of two things. Either this photo was taken at a slightly different moment, capturing someone who stepped into frame only once and was never otherwise recorded, or the man had been introduced into this specific copy of the photograph, while the original, held elsewhere, remained unaltered. Alden requested access to the archived version through a research contact at the National Archives. It took nearly 3 weeks to receive a response, longer than usual for such requests. When the digital copy finally arrived, Diane placed both images side by side on her monitor. The compositions were nearly identical, down to the exact folds in each soldier's uniform. But the version from the National Archives showed only empty space where the extra man stood in Grumman's copy. Bare tree branches, a patch of dry grass, nothing else. Diane stared at the screen for a long time before calling Alden into the room. He asked her the same question Dr. Nathan had asked weeks earlier. Had they identified anyone else in the photo? This time, Diane said she thought she recognized one soldier from a separate letter collection donated to the archive years prior, a set of correspondence from a family whose descendants still lived in the county. Alden told her to find that family. He did not say why, but she understood. If a real name could be attached to a real face in the photograph, then whatever this extra man represented would stop being an abstract mystery. It would become something that touched a living family. Right now, in the present, Diane Voss began pulling records from the County Historical Society's genealogy division. She started with a soldier she believed she recognized, a private named Elias Corwin, based on a faded photograph attached to a bundle of letters donated in 1998. The letters had been written by Corwin to his wife, describing camp life, food shortages, and long marches through Maryland farmland. Corwin's face matched a soldier in the front row of the photograph. Third from the left. This much was solid ground. His descendants still lived 2 counties over, running a small dairy farm that had been in the family since before the war. But Corwin's letters mentioned something odd, buried in a passage from late September 1862. Just after the battle, he wrote to his wife about a man in his company who had joined them only briefly, appearing the night before the battle and vanishing sometime during the fighting. Corwin described him only as the quiet one who did not eat with us and did not sleep. At the time, this line seemed like ordinary wartime writing. Soldiers often described strange, half-remembered details from chaotic days. Fatigue and fear blurred memory. Historians who had studied the Corwin letters decades earlier had noted the passage but dismissed it as folklore, the kind of ghost story soldiers told each other in the dark. Alden was no longer sure it was folklore. He requested the full company roster for Corwin's unit from military service records. Rosters from the Civil War were often incomplete, handwritten under difficult conditions, and prone to clerical error. Names were misspelled. Some soldiers were listed twice. Others were missing entirely if they died before proper paperwork was filed. The roster for Corwin's company listed 31 men present at Antietam. The photograph showed 32. Alden had Diane count the faces 3 separate times, worried they had made an error. Each count came back the same. 31 names, 32 soldiers in the frame. He asked the county archive for any additional muster rolls, casualty reports, or hospital admission records from the days surrounding the battle, hoping to find a stray name that had been dropped from the primary roster. Nothing matched. No soldier's name, living or dead, filled the gap. Diane suggested the extra man could be from a neighboring regiment, someone who wandered into frame by accident during the group photo. This happened occasionally in Civil War photography. Soldiers from different companies sometimes crossed paths near photographers' wagons. Alden did not dismiss this idea, but it did not explain the mismatched lighting. It did not explain why this man appeared in one copy of the photo and not the other. And it did not explain why Elias Corwin, a man who was actually present that day, had written about someone who did not eat and did not sleep. In the days before he vanished, Diane located Elias Corwin's descendants without much difficulty. The family still lived in the same county, and the current owner of the dairy farm, a woman named Ruth Corwin Hayes, welcomed the Historical Society's interest in her ancestors' letters. She had grown up hearing stories about Elias, though most of them were vague, passed down through generations until the details wore smooth like river stones. When Alden showed her the photograph, she studied it quietly before speaking. She confirmed the third soldier from the left was indeed Elias, based on family portraits she owned from later in his life. He survived the war and lived until 1911. Then Alden asked about the extra man in the back row. Ruth's expression changed. She said her grandmother used to tell a story about Elias, one the family rarely repeated outside the house. According to the story, Elias believed a stranger had joined his company the night before Antietam, someone none of the other soldiers seemed to fully notice or remember afterward. Elias described him in letters home, and later, in old age, told his own children that the stranger had borrowed a face from among the living, so he could stand among them undetected. Ruth admitted this sounded like superstition, the kind of story soldiers and families used to process trauma neither science nor memory could fully explain. She had never taken it literally, but she had never seen a photograph before either. Alden asked if any other documentation existed. Letters, journals, anything beyond family memory. Ruth produced a small leather journal, water-damaged and fragile, that had been passed down but rarely opened. Diane photographed each page carefully. Most entries were mundane, notes about weather and food rations. One entry, dated the night before the battle, was different. Elias wrote that a man had approached their campfire, asked no questions, accepted no food, and simply stood at the edge of the firelight until dawn. Elias described feeling as though the man was studying them, memorizing their faces, their postures, the way they stood. The entry ended with a line that made Diane's hands go still as she transcribed it. Elias wrote that when the man finally turned to leave before the battle began, his face, for just a moment, was not his own. Alden did not know what to make of this. Diaries from soldiers often contain strange, half-dreamed passages, shaped by exhaustion and fear. But paired with the photograph, paired with the missing 32nd man, the coincidence felt harder to dismiss. If you value deep investigations like this, consider subscribing. By this point, Alden's team had gathered enough material to form real theories. Though none of them fit cleanly, he organized what they knew and considered three possible explanations. The first theory was straightforward forgery. Someone, at some point in the last century, could have altered the tintype using techniques unknown to Alden's team, blending a modern face onto an authentic 1860s plate. Forgers of historical artifacts existed then and now, and rare Civil War items commanded high prices among collectors. But this theory struggled against physical evidence. The materials lab had confirmed the plate's chemistry and age. No known process from any era could produce this kind of seamless blending without leaving detectable traces. And Dr. Nathan's forensic tools found none of the usual signs of splicing, despite flagging the region as inconsistent. The second theory involved a simple case of mistaken identity. A soldier from another company might have stepped into frame at the last moment, someone whose presence went unrecorded due to the chaos of a large, fast-moving army. This explanation fit the historical record reasonably well. Group photographs from wartime were imperfect documents, taken quickly, often disorganized, but it did not explain the mismatched lighting, the absence of the man from the archived twin copy, or Elias Corwin's unsettling account of a stranger who arrived the night before and vanished during the fighting. The third theory was the one nobody on the team wanted to say out loud first. It suggested something beyond ordinary explanation, something closer to folklore than forensic science. Soldiers throughout history have told stories of unexplained figures appearing before major battles, sometimes described as omens, sometimes as death itself walking among the living. Elias Corwin's journal entry, written the night before one of the deadliest days in American military history, fit an old and uncomfortable pattern found in oral histories from multiple wars. Alden was careful not to present this as proven fact. He reminded his team that legends often grow from real trauma, dressed in symbolic language because raw fear is hard to describe plainly. A frightened soldier, sleepless before a slaughter, might easily misremember a stranger's face, might project meaning onto a shadow, but one detail resisted every explanation equally: the lighting angle on the extra man's face, calculated precisely by Dr. Nathan using shadow geometry from the surrounding trees, matched no natural light source available at Antietam that day. Not the sun, not the campfires soldiers described in letters, not any artificial source period photographers used. It matched nothing anyone could identify. Whatever stood in that frame, however it got there, was lit by something the analysis could not name. In the end, Marcus Alden's team did not solve the mystery. They wrote a careful internal report, listing every finding without forcing a conclusion the evidence could not support. The photo was archived under strict climate control, and a single high-resolution scan was made available to researchers, though the Historical Society declined to publish it widely, wary of sensational attention overtaking careful study. Dr. Priya Nathan continued her forensic work elsewhere, though she later said this case stayed with her longer than most. She had built her career on finding rational explanations for strange evidence. This was the first time her tools flagged something as altered, while every physical test confirmed it as original. Ruth Corwin Hayes kept her family's journal, now carefully preserved in acid-free paper, and passed the story down to her own children, the same way her grandmother once passed it to her. She said she did not know what to believe, only that her ancestor wrote those words the night before he nearly died on one of the worst battlefields in American history, and that some part of him believed them completely. Elias Corwin himself never explained the encounter beyond his journal entry. He lived nearly 50 more years after Antietam, raised a family, worked his land, and rarely spoke of the war at all. Whatever he saw that night, he carried it quietly, the way many soldiers carry things too strange or too painful to say aloud. The photograph remains what it has always been: a single frozen moment from a single terrible day, holding one detail that refuses to resolve. 31 names on a roster, 32 faces in the frame, a light source that matches nothing known to exist at that place. On that date, in that century, perhaps the explanation is simple: waiting for piece of evidence not yet found. A misfiled name, a neighboring soldier lost to bad record keeping. History is full of gaps like this, and most eventually close with patient research. Or perhaps some things are recorded by accident, caught by a camera before anyone understood what a camera could reveal. Stories older than photography, passed down in nervous whispers around dying fires, given form for one fraction of a second by a machine that was never meant to capture more than light and shadow. We may never know which is true. What we do know is this: somewhere in a temperature-controlled drawer, a small metal plate holds 32 faces from a single September morning in 1862. 31 of them have names, families, and graves that can be visited today. One of them does not.